Welcome back to another episode of Brain Buzz Podcast. I am your host, Drake, and Kyle is still out with parental leave, and he's quite happy to be. Today we have two guests, a little bit different than usual, but we have two awesome researchers from the University of Kent, Ricky Green and Mikey Biddlestone. They are researching conspiracy theories in multiple forms. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and explain what you guys do and what research you're interested in. Ricky, I guess you could go first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm Ricky, and I'm studying the psychology of conspiracy theories at the University of Kent, and I'm in my third year of that PhD, so I'm in my final year, and I'm mainly looking at attachment theory and how attachment anxiety can predict higher conspiracy belief, and that's what I've been focusing on in my research.
And I'm Mikey Biddlestone. I'm also a PhD researcher at the University of Kent, also in my third year, just finishing up. And I research the kind of group processes side of conspiracy beliefs. So the things like how we target specific out groups when we believe in conspiracies, or how we defend our in group.
Awesome. So lots of things to unravel here, but first off, let's talk about conspiracy theories in general, because I think that this has been a popular topic for our listeners, and a lot of people have wanted to hear an episode on conspiracy theories. So we pulled in you guys as the experts to come talk about it. Why on earth are conspiracy theories a thing? I guess we'll just start with that. I guess what is a true conspiracy theory? What are the prerequisites for a conspiracy theory? Is probably the best question to ask.
Ricky, do you want to take this one, or?
No,
Yeah.
go on,
Cool.
Mike.
Yeah. So it tends to be. I mean, there's kind of these different definitions that people tend to use, but it tends to be basically this kind of malevolent, secretive group of people behind closed doors, sort of pulling the strings in society, right? So it tends to be this sort of challenge of an official narrative, and specifying this small group of people acting in secret, essentially for their own selfish ends. That being said, there's some disagreement around whether it's it should only be powerful groups such as politicians and rich people, or if it's powerless groups such as ethnic minorities, for example. There's lots of conspiracies on the right about ethnic minorities, and that's about relatively powerless groups. So one of the issues in the research that we're kind of dealing with at the moment is it's been treated as this very kind of one-dimensional thing, right? The conspiracy beliefs are this general structure that if I believe in one, I'm going to believe in all of them, and that's that. There is some research to suggest that if I believe in one conspiracy theory, I'm going to believe in others. But we're now finding that there are these kind of different psychological underpinnings depending on the sort of type of conspiracy theory, such as if it's about a powerful group or a powerless group. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and just and just drawing on like some of the events that can happen in the world is what makes conspiracy theories more likely. I mean, if you take the current pandemic, for example, it's a threat to all of our lives, and takes away a lot of our controls as well. With the restrictions that are put in place. So this sort of thing has bred a lot of conspiracy theories that you can see, like they're spreading online around COVID-19. So yeah, it's like circumstances, like global events, like think about 9/11 as well. You get these things that happen in the world that create an uptick of conspiracy theories. So yeah, like threatening events as well is a real something that predicts these beliefs and how they come to flourish.
Yeah. What are your favorite conspiracy theories as researchers? I'm sure you're asked this all the time, but like Mikey, what's your favorite conspiracy theories? If you do, you even have
Yeah,
favorites?
definitely. I mean, it depends on what you mean by favorites. So I think in terms of the kind of ridiculousness of them, I kind of like
Yeah.
this one that didn't seem to take off, where there was this subreddit my friend found that kind of got deleted quite quickly, which was the idea that we're all being lied to about the fact that our bodies are mostly water. And the evidence that they were using is that people can be allergic to water, basically, which is kind of a misunderstanding of the syndrome that you can have, essentially. So yeah, I quite like that one because it's so out there, and it never took off, which is really interesting. I think it's because it doesn't really like specify a bad out group or something like that, so it's not as interesting to people. But in terms of the one that I think I'm definitely on the fence
Not as
on the
flashy.
fence about is the Epstein didn't kill himself conspiracy theory. Definitely. I mean, that gets me. I think that the first narrative that came out was that there's something going on here, and then afterwards people were kind of talking about, it's just the fact that he killed himself. So yeah, it's really hard not to be swayed by that one a little bit, personally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. What about
Uh,
you, Ricky?
Yeah, for myself, I do quite like the odds one. Don't really research them that much, to be honest, because I normally look at, general conspiracy beliefs, but
Mm.
these ones are a bit out there. Like David Icke's shape-shifting lizards theory. Do you know about that? So all world
I
leaders,
haven't
anyone,
heard it.
have you not? Okay, so so basically,
Maybe.
anyone who's in power conveniently is actually just a shape-shifting lizard overlord
Right.
that's come from somewhere else, and they control everything, but this is like really high end
Yeah.
conspiracy belief, and not as much people are drawn to them as like other relatively normal conspiracy theories. But it goes a little bit further, that one as well. So
Yeah.
uh, the the way that humans who are not able to see these shapeshifters, the way that it works is that we're under an illusion by the moon. It's just a satellite that's beaming these mind altering things to us, so that we can't see the reality in front of us.
Right.
So yeah, David Icke's
Yeah, yeah.
conspiracy theory, but also anything that Alex Jones pops out with. I mean, some of them are quite bad
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not that good, but some of them are really funny. He believes that about 80% of the frogs in some state in America are homosexual now, because this is government testing to try out weapons that are going to turn the enemy homosexual. So apparently they've been testing out on frogs there, and there's lots of homosexual frogs running around. I find that quite funny.
Utopia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I think, I think it's pretty funny though, because like, you guys, there's, as you said, Ricky, there's, those are awesome for stuff. I do remember hearing about the lizard people controlling us. I didn't realize how deep it went. But when it comes to COVID, and you mentioned, Ricky, like there's been a lot of, conspiracy theories popping up with COVID. I kind of want to touch on that before we go forward, because I've heard of like the 5G conspiracy, where like the 5G towers are, and especially that's a something that's quite popular in the UK as
Mm.
well, right? That was a pretty like common conspiracy theory
Yeah,
in the
seemed to
UK,
kick off
right?
really hard, really
Mhm.
early in the UK for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm.
so what were some of the conspiracy theories that that you think were the most gripping, or kind of not necessarily compelling, but like prevalent, I guess, conspiracy theories for
Mm.
COVID? And why do you think they were kind of taking you know, taking everybody by storm, and why people were so like willing to accept them?
hmm
Mm.
I guess the most common one was really the 5G one, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
The 5G masts are used to distribute COVID-19. But there's also the ones, of course, about the vaccines that Bill Gates is kind of orchestrating this thing where he's putting I think tracers into the kind of tracking
Mm.
devices into the vaccines, so that they can do what phones already do, and track us in the same way, for some reason. So
Right.
those were definitely the most
That
common
one
ones.
seems more problematic.
Yeah, yeah. I think in terms of health behaviors,
Am I alone by thinking that that one seems worse?
you mean in terms of its outcome on intentions, or
The way that I see it, I mean, it's because I think that the second one you're talking about, the
Mm,
trackers, because yeah, maybe the outcomes, but the behavioral changes that
yeah,
can occur from people truly
oh,
believing that.
totally.
Whereas
Mm.
5G,
Mm,
I mean, realistically, it did affect behaviors because people were destroying cell
mhm, mhm.
towers.
Mhm. Mhm.
But for the greater masses, I'm thinking of vaccination and trying to
Yeah,
improve
yeah. I
immunity
mean,
as a population. It could have a lot more significant consequences.
it's basically the same for both. So, the thing that we find with the 5G ones and the kind of general conspiracy belief is it generally reduces people, or is linked to reduced
Mm.
intentions to follow guidelines that reduce the spread of COVID-19, right? So if I believe in the conspiracies, I don't think
Mm.
it's real generally. So I tend to not want to follow those guidelines, which has its own implications. But you're right. I think with the vaccine ones, yeah, the fact that people are going to not do the whole vaccine uptake thing, and not believe that they're going to create a herd immunity and that kind of thing, I think that has more direct implications. I think you're right, for society. I don't know if you agree, Ricky, if there's like more negative implications on those as
Mm.
well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, just taken away from the COVID context, we know that there's consequences. There's empirical literature on this that shows the consequences of conspiracy beliefs. So looking at before COVID came about, and this is actually research that our supervisor, Professor Karen Douglas, and her ex-student carried out, Jolly, Jolly, and basically they exposed participants to these conspiracy theories regarding vaccines, about like how they can have bad effects, and the government are hiding this stuff up. And then they found that they had a decrease in intentions to vaccinate a fictitious child, like in the future, compared to participants who were not shown these conspiracy theories. So we already know that there's consequences to these beliefs, and I'm pretty sure that there has been research that shows that there's consequences of COVID-19 conspiracy beliefs on vaccine intentions. Has there
There
been,
is, yeah.
Mikey? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there
there
is.
is
Yeah,
some
yeah. I
direct
think
evidence
Paul Burton
of
and
this
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there is actually direct evidence of this, this problem that can occur if people believe in these particular conspiracy theories. So yeah, it is an issue. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think that's something I didn't even consider. I mean, obviously somebody that I mean, it seems obvious now that somebody that believes that 5G spreads COVID might less likely be wearing a mask and respecting social distance
Mm.
at that time,
Mm,
right?
of course.
Uh
Mm.
and their behaviors are definitely impacted by, what they're exposed to. This seems particularly more problematic and maybe more relevant these days because of globalization and online communication. Do you think that um, this was as big of a problem, say, 30 years ago when people weren't communicating as much?
So there's interesting stuff on that. So there's this really good paper. I don't know if you remember, Ricky. Is it like 2015? I think it was from where they looked at. I think it was the Chicago Tribune over something like it was
Mm.
over 100 years. I think a long period of time basically. And what they found was the mention of conspiracy theories does fluctuate over time, mostly in accordance with political events like elections and things like that. So they increase over elections, but overall there isn't this general increase in conspiracy theory belief anyway. Um, However, that's the kind of the
Okay.
mention of conspiracy theories, whereas sorry, that's kind of
Yeah.
looking at a very specific kind of subset of where the conspiracy theories are distributed. What that doesn't look at is kind of our propensity to believe
Mm.
in conspiracy theories, right? And I think that's
Mm.
I'm kind of yeah. I think basically what I'm going to say is that I think that with the use of the internet and stuff and the ease of distributing and the cheapness of distributing this misinformation for kind of malicious actors is just there's so many benefits for them to kind of control the narrative and stuff. So while I think there might not necessarily be this change over time in
Mm.
like an increase in belief, so if I'm susceptible to conspiracy theories, I was probably going to believe them anyway. That doesn't really change. But the point is that I'm going to be more likely to encounter
Mm.
conspiracy theories when I log on to the internet, right? And that's the point, I think, is the exposure of conspiracy theories has definitely increased, despite the fact that, I don't think there is this increase in the number of conspiracy theories that is around, if that makes sense. I think I've butchered that a little bit, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It takes more creativity to come up with these conspiracy theories, I
Mhm.
think.
Mm.
Mhm.
It's just that people are more exposed to them and are more you're not sure if they're actually more willing to believe them,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
It's just that they're more exposed to
exactly.
it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
Spread more. Hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. Like you can only really go by polls at the moment to get an idea of how much of a whole population is drawn to particular conspiracy theories, and I think that is quite low with like the COVID-19 conspiracy theories compared to other more popular ones. And just back to the question of like whether if we didn't have the communications and media that we have now, whether it would be the COVID-19 conspiracy theories would be as big. Well, I think it might possibly be the same, it's just that we might not see the conspiracy theories as much, they're just there in our face now, a lot easier through this communication. um, but going back to the point I made earlier, this is a real super threat to everyone. It literally threatens our lives, but it also takes away our freedoms and stuff like that. And it's this sort of thing which is like a real the main ingredient for conspiracy theories to thrive. So you know whether we had media the same communications 30 years ago or something, I don't think that would have changed things. There would have still been everyone would have still been threatened. They would have had their freedoms reduced and stuff like that. And so it may have had the same sort of effect back then. If that makes sense.
Yeah, just like geographically locked, but you're still going to still have, the like Mikey was saying, those groups that are underprivileged or underpowered that are
Mhm.
being manipulated because of these conspiracy theories, right?
Mhm.
And being
Mm.
being taken advantage of.
Mm.
Mm.
But it's just not happening at a more global level. It's just happening in your cities and your towns that you're in.
Definitely. But I think that being said,
Uh,
I think with Trump, we saw a big thing of the use of conspiracy theories and that kind of like, for need of a better word, like the perfection of the use of conspiracy theories in order to control your narrative, like he really captured a kind of subset of the population in the US and was able to really control their perceptions by using kind of the conspiracy narrative to his advantage, and essentially ended up kind of isolating this group of people to, no matter what, just continue supporting him. There's just always an explanation as to why he's the best person in the world,
Mm.
the moral crusader or something.
that goes kind of in line. So like you would probably consider the idea that Trump actually won the election, that was a miscount, would be a conspiracy theory, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Uh, I mean, yes, yeah, basically, yeah. If someone was to say that, well, Trump's not in power because it was rigged and that blah blah blah, then yeah, that's a conspiracy theory, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and he kind of propagated that as well, the idea that he only
Mm,
think he probably should have won, even though,
mm,
So I
Definitely.
think I can see where, there's tangible, like, it's funny that you said that, when you said, Ricky, that there's tangible issues and problems that can occur from conspiracy theories. I don't
mm,
think a lot of people, myself included, before we started talking to you, really would have considered that to be the truth. Like, it just
mm,
seems like conspiracy theories are just kind of these things that are like,
yeah,
okay, someone's kind of off the rocker and they're thinking that
mm,
this is the case, but it's a lot more prevalent than that, and there's a lot more tangible issues and behaviors that are occurring from these conspiracy theories, right, guys?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if you look at like the moon landings, for the US, and some people might think that they're faked. Well, there's no, I can't think of any consequences that can come from that, apart from someone may trust the government a bit less, but when has a government ever had the full trust of its population anyway? So it's not, like, but then there are actually loads of examples of these consequences. And loads of bits of research that shows basically a reduction in climate change, trying to reduce your carbon footprint if you're exposed to climate change conspiracy theories. As I said before, vaccination, there's less uptake if you're exposed to them theories. We, as research that we've done as well, there's lower social distancing and hygiene practices being done during the pandemic if they believe in these conspiracy theories. And I think there's loads of examples of many others, which I can't quite. Can you think of any others? I know there's like workplace consequences as well. Mikey, do you go on.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. There's
Can
the
you remember
workplace,
some
but
of
I
the
think
others?
also like, I mean, yeah, again going back to like the Trump thing, is that the January 6th kind of attack on the Capitol, I think was a huge one in terms of like it
Mm,
wasn't just this kind of general effect of the fact that you've been exposed to this conspiracy and then it kind of slightly reduces your intentions. This kind of galvanized a whole group of, i I would say, populist people who and there's this idea that like conspiracy thinking is sort of baked into populism a little bit because it's about the people versus the powers that be and that kind of thing. And I think that allows the narrative to be really manipulated a bit into much more conspiratorial like terms. But yeah, like I say, the attack on the Capitol, I think, was a big wake up call for the kind of, without being too dramatic, the
mm,
kind of Hitler-esque ability to sort of control, a small group of people so that they feel like their actions are legitimate when really what's happening is that they're like a danger to democracy, essentially. So that was a big wake up call in terms of how conspiracy theories can leak into the real world, I think.
Yeah,
mm,
it seems like there's kind of what Ricky's getting at is like this idea of like it's passively affecting, like your thoughts are affecting your behaviors in a passive way, and you're mentioning the attack on the Capitol would be a very active, like galvanizing, like
mm,
change and action right away, which are two equally problematic things where you're hoping that the population is looking out for the best of everybody, but these conspiracy theories can kind of conflate what's best for the population.
Definitely, yeah. That's a really good way to
um
put it. And actually, it just reminded me is there's this idea of with the misinformation. There's this thing I learned about recently called stochastic terrorism, which is the idea that you put out this kind of radicalizing idea out onto the internet. And the idea is that you're not necessarily targeting a specific person or group of people, but the point is that it's out there now. So by putting it out there, you're essentially indirectly causing a terrorist attack, if that makes sense. And I think that there's an element of that in this, which is you're talking
right.
about the passivity of it and that kind of thing, and the indirectness of it. I think really plays into it, and the difference, yeah, between that kind of
mm,
passive and much more manipulated, yeah, actions and collective action.
mm,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So like let's talk a little bit about. I think this kind of goes towards Ricky's work, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Mikey's, like the social aspect of it, because I think that's a really fascinating aspect of conspiracy theories. Um, we haven't even mentioned flat earthers yet, guys. Come on.
We're holding it off.
I'm sure that one's a very common one with you guys.
Definitely, yeah. No, that's a great one.
So I mean, Ricky, like when it comes to this, you're talking about attachment theory, and that always kind of, whenever I hear attachment theory, I think of like, trying to explain why things are occurring or why people believe these things. Do
Hmm.
you want to explain briefly what your work is? Maybe you can't explain specifically why people believe conspiracy theories, but like why
Uh-huh.
people might be more prone to believe them,
Yeah.
maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so that's kind of what my research is doing. I'm looking at the psychological factors that will make it more likely for someone to be drawn to these conspiracy theories. And yeah, in my research, I found something called attachment anxiety to be a predictor of these beliefs. And so what attachment anxiety is, it's like a kind of a relationship style that we have and in our approach to relationships. And we have different approaches, and for the most part, most people have secure attachment styles. So, and what that means is that we feel happy about ourselves, and we feel happy about others in relationships. So we trust others, and we're confident that we're fine in relationships. So most people are secure. But there are two other sort of predominant attachment styles, and the other one is, which is not what I focus on, but it's attachment avoidance, and this is where you tend to have positive views of yourself, but you have negative views of others. So you're not really bothered about relationships, and you're quite happy to be on your own. And but then there's attachment anxiety, where you do have positive views of others, but you have a negative view of yourself. So and I'm finding that it's this attachment anxiety that predicts conspiracy belief. And when I look into attachment theory and what it means to be anxiously attached, they have a tendency to catastrophize, and to make things seem considerably worse than what they actually are. So that's kind of the reason why I think that they might be drawn to them, because they have this tendency to view things as much worse than what they actually are. And the reasons that they do this, so says attachment theory, is that they do it so that they can get the attention and from partners and friends and family, because they don't feel that no one will pay attention to them unless they are catastrophizing. So that's why I think that people with attachment anxiety are drawn to these conspiracy theories, because it's another way to catastrophize life's problems, and try and draw the attention from their friends and from their friends and family. So does that make sense with why attachment anxiety might predict conspiracy belief? Is that kind of clear?
Yeah, actually, it does. It's a connection that I never would have thought of until I
Mm,
started reading your work, and the focus of your work. So it's like, because I think attachment theory is an interesting thing. It's something that I was interested in doing before I went into my program in grad school,
mhm,
and it cut. I think that you say it in a way that makes complete sense.
mhm,
It's originally a developmental theory, right? The
mhm,
idea of
mhm,
like how you're attached to your parent can
mm,
impact your future attachments and things like that, right? And I
mhm,
think anxious avoidant or anxious attachment, um, often when it comes to relationships, when you're older, which I think is like, you're talking about not kids here that are talking about conspiracy theories. You're talking
yes.
about, fully grown
Mhm,
adults that maintain those avoidant or
mhm,
anxious attachments or secure attachments. That anxious attachment is it's unique, right? Because sometimes it's associated with being over clingy, needy, or being resistant to others because you're worried that they'll leave you.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I see that connection between catastrophizing, wanting to be acknowledged by others, and to get them to come closer to you by kind of overreacting and
mhm,
catastrophizing. So that's
mhm.
kind of, it makes complete sense to me.
Right.
And so how did you kind of go about doing this, or what did you find within
Yeah.
this work?
Yeah, cool. So firstly, I established a relationship between attachment anxiety and conspiracy belief, and that's in a paper that I published after my master's. And now in my PhD, this is my PhD now. I'm diving further into this relationship and figuring out what is it that makes this relationship happen. And as I said, reading attachment theory, catastrophizing was the first thing that I thought, right, let's see if catastrophizing, so it's a new element that I'm bringing into the study where I'm now measuring catastrophizing alongside attachment anxiety and conspiracy belief. And I do find that, and I should say as well that I'm also measuring all of the attachment styles at the same time. So I have avoidance in there, but when we run them all in analysis, the only thing that pops up is high attachment anxiety. We do sometimes find it's the combination of low avoidance and high anxiety, but generally it's just highly anxiously attached individuals that are drawn to these conspiracy theories. But yeah, in this new research I've been doing at the moment, we are finding, we've measured catastrophizing in a number of ways. And what we found is that attachment anxiety predicts catastrophizing about pain, stress, social situations. They will just report it as being much more threatening than people who are secure or avoidant. And what we also find is that all of these means of catastrophizing also predict conspiracy beliefs. So this hasn't been looked at before in the literature, specifically looking at catastrophizing and conspiracy belief. But in the data that I've got at the moment, which is still in progress, so it probably won't be published for a while. But yeah, we are finding that attachment anxiety predicts catastrophizing, which in turn predicts conspiracy belief. So we are finding that link there, and kind of going from that. Because one of the challenges, we've talked about some of the consequences of conspiracy belief, and so one of the challenges now is to see how we can attenuate these negative effects of conspiracy beliefs. And it's quite a difficult job to do. There's no silver bullet or golden bullet, whatever the phrase is. I'm not quite sure. But
Yeah,
going
it's
from
no
my
wrong. Yeah.
yeah, okay, cool, thanks. But going by the findings I have, and also these are ideas, not new ideas, but some, in fact, Karen Douglas and Alexandra Chiotka, our supervisors, have talked about how can we reduce these beliefs? Well, maybe it's not best to tackle them head on and to try and say, look, what you're believing in isn't correct, but it might be best to go to the root of the problem and to deal with people's anxiety issues, to deal with the way that they think. So just bringing it back to my research, is because I know that catastrophizing is linked to conspiracy belief and attachment anxiety as well, that there's interventions in clinical psychology that actually deal with helping people to not catastrophize anymore. It's called cognitive restructuring. So that's like this final aim of my PhD, this last sort of project, which I'm hopefully going to be running soon, where we're going to be sort of testing these ideas to see if we can reduce people's anxieties, basically, and help them improve their thinking styles, to see if this can inadvertently also reduce conspiracy belief. Because we're not going to tackle the beliefs, but we are going to measure them, but we're going to see if this intervention can do something about it. So yeah, that's kind of like an end game of where I want to get with this attachment and catastrophizing business. So
That's brilliant. I think that's really awesome, Ricky. I think it's always important when we're doing research not to just say, oh, this explains this. You have to kind of look at for mediators or moderators, right? And that's
mhm,
kind of what you're doing with catastrophization, right? You can't just say, oh, because you're anxiously attached, you're going to be believing in conspiracy theories, right? It just
mhm,
doesn't end at that.
mhm,
And the work that you're doing is awesome in a sense that you're trying to figure out a way to, reduce the amount of people that are like readily available or readily willing to believe
mhm,
conspiracy theories, and through not just telling them that the conspiracy theories are wrong,
mhm,
because we know, anytime someone strongly believes something, telling them they're wrong is not the solution, right?
mhm,
You have to give them reasons, or there has to be other things going on to fix the way that they're thinking.
mhm,
And I think that's a really unique perspective too to consider within conspiracy theories, is that you can't just tell somebody. I'm sure everybody's had a situation where someone believed in a conspiracy theory or believed something you didn't believe, and you just told them straight up they are wrong. How many people actually change their opinion immediately after that, right? Probably 0%.
Yeah.
mhm,
And I think that the work
0.1
that you're
maybe.
doing, yeah, yeah,
mhm,
maybe 1 in a million, like there's a possible chance.
yeah,
But I think that's a really cool approach and a really cool line of work that you're focusing on to address that. on that topic, then, you know, I'm trying to kind of play the devil's advocate here and think of the way that we're looking at this and where we're talking about people that believe in conspiracy theories, because our perspective is that they're wrong.
Hmm.
What is the, how can you play the devil's advocate of being like, maybe we're wrong and the conspiracy theory is right? Like, what is your what do you guys think about that, or have you thought about that while you're doing your work? I'll give it to
Definitely, yeah,
Mikey, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
Ricky can
Hmm.
can
Yeah,
go from
that's
there.
good. Was Yeah, we have to consider it, and I think early on, definitely in the PhD, there was this. It was very easy to just sort of say these are all just wrong, beliefs or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really good point, and there's this push to kind of distinguish between what they would consider, rational suspicion and irrational suspicion, which is also really difficult to distinguish, and you have to think of ways to kind of define that. And there's some recent research which I think is really interesting on this, which is that so there's, as I've mentioned previously, there's like these beliefs about powerless or powerful groups, and this kind of um, propensity to believe in conspiracy theories about powerless groups, I think, in my opinion, is much less rational, I guess, is a word that I'd be apprehensive to use, just because it's much less likely that a very small powerless group of people is going to be able to orchestrate something that would pull the strings behind the scenes, in society. But on the other hand, these conspiracy theories about very powerful groups, I think make much more sense, because they do have powerful influence in the world with the money and this kind of thing. So that being said, I think it has to be judged on a kind of case by case basis with conspiracy theories, and at the same time, I think it's important not to really get bogged down too much in whether it's true or not. The point is, what kind of evidence is it based on? And I think that, when what we know from the research is that people tend to approach kind of ambiguous evidence with intuitive processing styles when they tend to believe in conspiracy theories. This is kind of like you're relying on gut feelings. Essentially, you have a faith in your intuition, as opposed to looking at it kind of analytically and looking for evidence that corroborates it. So kind of with an annoying answer, I think it's more about how people approach the information and the evidence, as opposed to what the actual theory is in the first place, right? If you're relying on gut feelings, I think you need to be more considerate of whether this might be an irrational suspicion versus a rational one.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So what this is actually really important information for everybody to have, because I think it's such a problem right now, and I think my assumption is that there's probably a link between conspiracy beliefs and, faith in science, perhaps, or faith in, authority figures, and just research in general. So what do you think is like the link there? Like, how can somebody say that they're well researched? Because this is a pet peeve of mine, as a researcher. Hearing people say, I've researched this topic, so you need to trust me.
Mm.
What should research look like, guys? What is rationally researching something and doing your work to find something? Because you can look online, you can Google things, um, and find the top 100 hits, and they will agree with whatever conspiracy you belief you
Hmm.
have, right? So how can you be diligent about this? What are some strategies that you guys would recommend, if you can, for people that want to be more knowledgeable, but they just don't know how, other than Googling or YouTubing things?
Yeah, I'd make a start at that. I'd just say to really look at the information that you're looking at. I mean, but I'm sure that a lot of conspiracy believers have told this a lot anyway. So I don't know how far this information will go, but really looking at the source. Who's saying it. And is it really credible? Can it be backed up? Are other sources backing this up as well? And looking for like look into official sources as well. I mean, you can get official information off of Facebook, social media, and things like that. But whatever you do get off of social media companies, look to see if it is from a reputable source. If it's academic literature, that's great, or if it's actual, uh, you know, well thought opinions by people. I mean, I'm not too sure, but yeah, I mean, for me, it's just looking at the source and making sure that it's credible. But yeah, I mean, it's hard though, because what I have noticed in a lot of conspiracy videos is that a lot of them now do have doctors in them and PhDs in them. But not everyone anyone can get a PhD, and not to put our stuff down, but like you do see, and
We're not special. We're not special.
yeah, but like, because you'd think that if someone has a PhD, then that's authority speaking there, right? But I see that they're saying it a lot in those conspiracy videos. They're actually getting doctors in and PhDs in, but then when you look, sometimes they're talking way out of their field. So that's something else you should look out for. That, okay, you might say that this video is credible because it has Dr. whoever there, but find out what their actual credentials are and see what they're talking about now. And it might be totally different. They might have done a PhD in something else, but now they're talking about epidemiological stuff. It's just, so be mindful of stuff like that. It might appear to be, legit, but I'd say check the name of that doctor and look further back. Mm.
Yeah, I could definitely.
Yeah, I think keeping the authority, or whoever the authority is that's kind of the resource or the source that you're using, being more knowledgeable about what they do and why you should trust them is really important. Not just taking their doctor title or whatever title they have as credentials, right?
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add to that as well.
Mikey,
like,
it seemed like you had something to say.
Yeah. So yeah, I would second what Ricky said, and I think part of that is I think there's quite a simple approach by how easy it is to kind of access information in the first place. I think it's quite easy also to just look for conflicting information, and I think a really good approach is to just actively do that automatically. So if there's a piece of information that you encounter that you feel like really changes your perspective on something, feels like everything now makes sense and that kind of thing, I think it's just a good idea as a sort of rule of thumb to approach it in these things in this way, is to just quickly go on Google and type in something that is essentially the opposite of what you've just read and see whether there are sources that are also saying the exact opposite. And often you can find something if you literally just, type in the phrase debunked or something like that. But the point is that people don't want to do that, because the reason they believe in these conspiracy theories is because it makes their world make sense, and it kind of feels like it attenuates a lot of the kind of existential worries that they have in the world, and it also, of course, makes them feel unique. It bolsters their self-image and things like that. So it's just kind of too attractive to some people. And so what I mean is, if you really do want to be a kind of a genuine rational skeptic, then definitely just try and Google the opposite of what you've just read. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Confirmation bias is it's a killer,
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
Like whenever people validate your thoughts or beliefs, it's rewarding
Tasty,
to
yeah.
have that kind of sense of community almost, or like, camaraderie.
Mhm.
And on that topic then, Mikey, let's kind of get into your work then, because there is another side of this, right? I definitely think that from what I've seen as just a very bystander, lay person, there must be a source of a sense of community within these conspiracy theorists, right?
Definitely. So there's a lot of research into kind of Reddit communities about conspiracies and things. So there's a lot to unpack, but basically the idea is that I think partly things like forums and social media and stuff like that has really created this kind of alternative to people who would otherwise just be sort of ostracized, and by that I mean the people who are they have a real kind of conspiracy mindset about the world. They believe in lots of different conspiracy theories. I think the internet has really acted as a sort of support group, support network for them. And I think that has good and bad things. I think it means that at least they're not ostracized and lonely and things like that. But at the same time, it becomes this echo chamber, which has been chatted about in the media for years now, about how it really just confirms these biases that we already have. But yeah, the element that I research in that is that basically there's this kind of very well known, very commonly attributed idea of the identification we have with our in group, right? So if I have high identification with a group that has a certain interest, this conventional identification with this in group means that I'm likely to feel satisfied by this group identity. I'm likely to see them as part of my personal identity. I'm also likely to kind of do things for the group, which really benefits the group as opposed to just myself, right? I might actually be altruistic and do something that doesn't really help me, but it helps the whole group. So that's kind of conventional identification. But what I look at is narcissistic identification. And what this is it's still positive about your in-group, but it's based on this kind of insecure preoccupation to gain higher recognition for your in-group. So it's this idea that you're kind of a victim and that your group is not recognized as much as it should be. And that's why it crosses over with narcissism in a kind of individual sense, because individual narcissism is the idea that kind of everyone's against you, they're constantly trying to undermine you, so it's very defensive in that sense. So similarly to how actually individual narcissism predicts conspiracy beliefs, in the sense that it's kind of this defensive response to kind of deflecting from your own psychological shortcomings. In the collective sense, with collective narcissism, what it tends to be is protecting your group or defending your group by basically using conspiracy theories to deflect from your in-group shortcomings. And what this tends to mean is you have to specify an out-group to be responsible for this, right? So it can't be that your in-group has faults or anything. It has to be that an out-group is responsible for your negative circumstances. So what you do is select an antagonistic out-group to be the sort of conspirator in this network of beliefs and stuff. So I think this is a lot of where kind of like anti-Semitic conspiracy beliefs come from, right? And it's this sort of these stereotypes about like powerful and competent but cold in terms of anti-Semitism, right? And I think it's kind of a common out-group conspiracy because of that. But it can also be different contexts, in a national sense. If I have national narcissism with the fact that I'm British, for example, I'm more likely to believe that foreign governments are undermining, things that the British government do. So, for example, maybe if there's, vaccine rollout, if something goes wrong, if I had national narcissism, I would say it's everyone else's fault, right? Rather than the British government for doing something wrong, the vaccine rollout. Yeah. So that's basically the aspect that I look at with my research.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think of flat earthers as an example. Like there's flat earther conventions where people are meeting, and their antagonistic group would probably be NASA, the
Definitely.
government,
Yep.
right? And disbelieving anybody that thinks that the world's round or a globe. I think it's a really unique perspective, right? It does seem like it's combative though, right? This collective narcissism's like it's us against everyone else, or us against
Definitely,
whoever the enemy is. And I can see that causing a lot of issues, especially your example of anti-Semitism and blaming Jewish people for whatever your issues are. As soon as you start collectively doing that as a group, that's a hate group, right? You're literally hating on another group.
Well, of course,
and possibly affecting your behavior, as you guys said, towards those groups.
Well, actually, yeah. So it's good that you said that, actually, because it's linked to kind of outgroup derogation and outgroup conflict. But actually, what some research that I've been doing that's actually under review at the moment is showing that not only do collective narcissists believe in conspiracy theories about outgroups, they are also more likely to be willing to conspire against their fellow in-group members. So basically what this suggests is that because of this kind of insecure identification with their in-group, as opposed to this kind of conventional positive in-group identification, they are basically willing to cut loose their fellow in-group members, right? Because basically what they're doing is they're using the group as opposed to actually having this full-on positive identification with them. So yeah, basically what we kind of concluded from this research was that especially populists, because we found it was particularly in Trump supporters, basically we should watch out for those people, unsurprisingly, because they might be the people that not only are going to do things like storm the Capitol and stuff, but they may actually screw each other over within their own identity groups, so they're just not people that we should trust. Of course we should help, but yeah, it's not good to trust them in conspiratorial terms, of course.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to be partnering up with a group that's about narcissism for the group, but also focused on themselves as well, and validating their own opinions over the group.
It's about them. It's the selfish.
That sounds very toxic.
Extremely.
It does. It sounds like a relationship you don't want to be in. So what clearly there's this group, or is it within conspiracy theories, is it across the board that they're generally, you're seeing this collective narcissism, or are there specific like groups within conspiracy theories that are less like that, that are less necessarily like defensive, I guess, against their conspiracy theory group, in group?
Not really. I think the point is that it's about the type of identification as opposed to what group it is, right? So we've found that it's been shown in lots of different contexts. So the interesting thing with collective narcissism is you don't just because I mean, a very helpful one to think about is nationalism. So I have this kind of superiority belief about my nation that's very intuitive to people, but you can also have similar sentiments but
Yeah.
within different group contexts. So for example, there's some research that my supervisor's been doing, Alexandra Chachotska, on this identification with Polish Catholic collective narcissism, and that tends to predict this belief in a kind of gender conspiracy. So that's the idea that feminists are trying to undermine, classic values in society, and they're trying to change society for the worse. What we need to do is defend society and be conservative about things, and that's in the kind of Catholic sense. So that's your identification with Catholicism in Poland. And there's also data on like sports teams as well, and the fact that you kind of see more of a difference between your own team and other teams. We've recently done a study on the European Super League that was mentioned, where we found similar effects with, when people have a collective narcissistic kind of team identification, there's these kind of negative effects, which we still need to analyze really. But yeah, so yeah, it's all context basically. So no, I don't think there is a group where it wouldn't be the case. It's about the type of identification.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to go on that, I think kind of just answering what he's saying, that it is basically like collective narcissism is a robust predictor of all different conspiracy beliefs. Like but it doesn't mean that there's a particular group that is all highly collectively narcissistic. But for the people who are in these groups that do score high in this, collective narcissism, then they more than likely believe in conspiracy theories. So basically, like it seems like all collective narcissists are very inclined to believe in conspiracy theories, but it doesn't mean that it's not really speaking to whether a whole group of people are collective narcissists. That makes sense.
Although that
Right.
being said, though, when we did our research on national narcissism in the US, we found that Trump supporters were higher in national narcissism, US national narcissism. So there are groups that, that's compared to Clinton voters. So basically, there maybe are groups where collective narcissism is more likely to thrive, but the idea is that, it's the collective narcissism itself, as opposed to the fact that they are, Trump supporters or populists or something. It's about the identification type. Don't know if that's clear, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is. It's really interesting. There's just like, there's so many different aspects. Like you're talking about, why people are individually drawn to conspiracy theories, and then as a group, why they stay in it or why they're focused on it. There's a lot of levels to this. What if you guys can kind of talk about the opposite side of this, is like, what are the benefits of believing in conspiracy theories, other than, group affiliation? Are there other benefits to believing in conspiracy theories?
Um, Psychologically, no, I'd say at the moment, and even other than that, no, not really. I mean, it's it can bring about change on a societal level. Like some conspiracy theories aren't always just theories; they turn out to be facts sometimes. So, they can promote change, and they can maybe promote transparency within governments and things like that. So there can be some benefits, and you know but believing in conspiracy theories is maybe a good sign for it's I think it's been called as like a healthy sign for democracy and things like that. At least we're challenging, we're not just allowing the status quo to stay the same and stuff like that. So there are some like benefits like that can come about from it. None that I know of that like of anything that's actually happened, but there are these ideas that have been talked about, how they are kind of they're seen as a good health sign of democracy and things like that. But yeah, just I had the one other thing. Go on, Mikey. Sorry, I've just lost my other train of thought there.
I was just going to say, I think it's like the implied mechanisms can be positive, right? So like Ricky said, it's like maybe a sign of a healthy democracy. There's also this idea in the literature that there's kind of an evolutionary basis to conspiracy beliefs, right? And the idea is that it's based on this kind of tribalism to protect your group. The idea is that it's adaptive to be suspicious about groups, right? Because they might be a tribe that may be willing to kind of undermine your tribe or to exploit your tribe, something like that, right? So in an evolutionary sense, then it kind of makes sense. But I guess what we say or is implied by our research is that this is kind of not really that functional now, and it sort of goes overboard, and it goes too far, and what it can do is backfire and just mean that you don't actually perceive the world in real terms. You just see it in suspicious terms.
And that suspicion can cause a lot of issues too. Sorry, Ricky, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just remembered the point that I forgot just at the end there, that the current school of thought at the moment is that people are drawn to these conspiracy theories as a way to satisfy psychological needs. So that's kind of the theoretical development at the moment with conspiracy theory literature, is that people may be drawn to to these ideas to satisfy certain psychological needs. So in that, what that kind of says is that, okay, so our conspiracy, do they satisfy these psychological needs? That's something that, we think that they're drawn to them to do this, but we don't know whether they actually do create, alleviate anxiety or things like that. So I was going to say, like, psychologically, we don't know of any psychological benefits. We don't know if they actually will make people feel better psychologically, by drawing to these theories. But there is actually research to show that there might actually, the opposite of that. That in fact, these conspiracy theories breed more anxiety, or can bring about more feelings of anxiety in people. Because then they start going further down a rabbit hole, and they start getting even more uncertain about the world and become even more anxious. So I know that wasn't exactly the question that you asked, what is the benefits, but psychologically, I don't think there really are any benefits. And but it's just funny that you asked that, because that is kind of the framing of the developments at the moment of the reasons of why we think people are drawn to them as a means to satisfy psychological needs, but doesn't seem like they do that at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, you want to know why people are really drawn to it, and I guess there has to be some sort of reason that, that it's beneficial, they see benefit in it. And
Mm.
I think the group affiliation makes sense to me, and being able to, create that community makes sense, and why they're more likely to believe in that. Now we know, Ricky, based on your work that you're doing, there are behavioral and like attachment theory behind that, possibly personality variables as well, and other things that draw people to those beliefs. It's just an interesting, I see it as like a creativity thing. Like, oh yeah, you could see, like, some people see it as entertainment, but then whenever it stops becoming entertainment, that's when I think that you guys would probably say it becomes problematic, right?
Definitely,
Mm.
that's a
Mhm.
really good point that actually I think the literature kind of fails to identify is the different kind of approaches to believing in conspiracy theories. Like what is
Mm.
genuine belief in conspiracy theories? Because it could be that it's more of a functional thing, right? So, for example, we know that people who want to display themselves as unique and special, they tend to be believers in conspiracy theories. But whether that means that they genuinely believe the conspiracy theory or not is a different subject, right? It's
Mm.
an identifying signal. How genuine is that belief? And that's something that's really hard to capture, especially with our kind of the way that we design studies and stuff. It's still early days, in terms of uncovering these effects. But yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think you guys had mentioned it earlier as well. You guys are using self-report,
Mhm.
just like a lot of researchers are in psychology. And this is
Mhm.
contentious, right? This
Mm.
is contentious work where people might not want to truly be honest about their beliefs about conspiracy theories, because they know they're in the
Mm.
minority, right? So when
Mhm.
you're asking, do you believe in these things, they might be less
Mhm.
forthcoming, and that, they might have that bias where they want to, make themselves look better by saying, oh no, I don't think of conspiracy theories that way, but they might truly feel that way. And so that's always tough within, self-report research or in psychology and research
Mhm.
in general. I think that you guys are doing
Mhm.
an interesting, it's a fine line you have to
Mhm.
balance, right, between
Mhm.
getting genuine responses and getting, and having to kind of dig and find ways to ask it in different
Definitely,
ways.
yeah. There
Mhm.
needs to be more done on that. And there's this guy that we know, Kenzo Nera, does a lot of stuff on what he calls meta conspiracies, right? Which is the idea that the term conspiracy theory was invented in order to delegitimize questionings of power, right? And it was invented by the CIA.
Mm,
And kind of touching on what you're saying there is that even as researchers ourselves asking them questions about conspiracy theories, we could be conspirators to them. So he was saying, maybe we could do a study. He was saying it sort of as a joke, but I think it's true, is that we should maybe include a question, which is that what
mm,
kind of intentions do you believe the researcher of this survey to have? What do you think we're going to do with this data?
Mm.
Because I think that would really capture more implicit kind of
right.
underlying conspiracist perceptions, of our research.
Mm.
You have a unique population here as well, right? And I think that's a really cool point that a lot of people really there's a lot of work into, how do we know that the people that we're asking these questions are reporting
Mm.
honestly, right? and
Mm.
and we talked a little bit about like faith in science, faith in research, which could presumably be related to, you know, how much you believe in conspiracy theories, or the way that your logic works. And then you're asking, you know, as researchers, you guys are asking a tough population to sit down and trust that you guys are doing research that's going to be beneficial for them when they might not trust you. Um,
Mm.
so it's a tough population. I mean, it's really cool work, and I think that's why it seems like it's a relatively new line of work. Like it's for research purposes, like a few decades probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very young. It's a very
Mm.
young line of work that people, you know, it takes decades and decades to get this line of work to get to, you know, to build on it and learn from each other. So I mean, it's cool work. You guys are doing some seminal work
Yeah,
here
exactly. Yeah, thank you very
for
much.
conspiracy
That's really
theories.
exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's our
Yeah.
excuse for using simple designs as well. It's like, oh, we need to uncover the first effects first.
Yeah. We're just starting from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, every line of work has to kind of start somewhere, right?
Mm.
And like we talked about sleep last week on an episode, and like sleep research is still
Oh yeah,
young, and you'd think that that's something that should have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, right?
it's
Mm.
so hard to measure, isn't
But
it? Like, I saw a lecture on was it lucid dreaming, and yeah,
electroencephalography,
and it's
yeah,
just crazy how I just don't know how direct it is, you know, and I wish we had more insights, but
yeah.
that makes it more mysterious, doesn't it? It
Mm.
makes people want to research it more. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And that's what I hope. I mean, I think that's the one unique thing I will say about your work, guys, is that and Karen Douglas's work, and anybody that's doing work in conspiracy theories, it is entertainment. Like it is entertaining for a lot of people, and you have different beliefs about the work that
Mm.
you do, right? So I think there was a lot of interest from our viewers to have you guys on to talk about conspiracy theories, because people enjoy, you know,
Mm.
learning about it, like hearing about these conspiracy theories, whereas most people aren't like, you know, okay, you know, sleep's interesting, but they're not
Mm.
actively on their
Mhm.
off days going and looking about how to like what sleep stages there are,
Mhm.
right?
Mm.
So you have a fine topic where people are genuinely interested, but there's
Mm.
just so much that actually has to be done
Yeah.
scientifically, and it gets a little bit drier as you
Yeah.
go, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Mm.
always like fun talking, you know, you guys aren't
Mm.
laughing and talking about conspiracy theories every day you research this stuff, right? It's not
Not
what it
every day
is.
anyway,
No.
yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I'm sure you guys get tons of people giving you new conspiracy theories when you talk about the work that you do, or talking about ones you haven't heard of. But I don't want to talk forever about what you know, what conspiracy theories and stuff that you guys have heard of. But is there any popular like myths or misconceptions? I know there are with the work that you guys do. It's grounded in the fact that there's myths and misconceptions. But what do you think are the most like interesting for you, or possibly like the myths that you really want to kind of um, bring to the forefront about the work that you guys do?
I think I've got one actually. Is basically just the
Mm.
kind of intentions of science researchers. You know, I mean, we do a lot of data collection on Reddit, and we get this. I mean, for the majority, it's quite positive responses where people say they enjoyed our surveys and they want to see what the results are and stuff. But we do get this kind of very sizable minority, basically really questioning our intentions and seeing us as well. It's interesting actually. The stereotypes they have are things like, what are you going to do with my data? And I think that comes from things like, you know, the scandals around Facebook and how they use your data and stuff. But we don't do that. You know, it's always been anonymous. It's always been on, like, you know, that we have all this ethics stuff that we have to do to make sure it's kind of like stored on password protected computers, all that kind of thing, right? And I think what people don't, it's easy for people to assume is that, you know, we just want to, I don't know, publish papers and get cool results and lie about what it is and all that kind of thing. And I mean, it doesn't mean anything coming from me because I am one of them, but, you know, it couldn't be further from the truth, you know, like I mean, all of this
Yeah.
push for open science, I think, is really important for people to understand that that's what we're trying to address here, is showing you our working out. You know, we have the data freely online for you to access and all that kind of stuff. So this sort of perception, it
Mm.
just makes me a bit sad sometimes, you know, that there's this perception that we're trying to manipulate the evidence or something, you know, and our intentions are the complete opposite, where we're happy to have, you know, null effects or whatever you want to call it, because it
Mm.
still pushes forward the literature and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. Yeah, I don't have like it's kind of very similar to what Mikey's saying basically, you know, about yeah, about the perception of what we are trying to get up to as scientists, when we're trying to get answers from people. And I think what Mikey was commenting on is when, where we've collected data from Reddit, and they can comment on, after we've had an advertisement, the message is kind of basically what he was reiterating. But like similar to that, like in, in my paper that I had published after my master's, that got picked up like by this online newspaper, which is really cool. It was like my first sort of media attention on my paper. But what was funny was reading the comments after that. And I'd done this research by myself with my supervisor. I didn't have no funding or anything like that. But then I was basically lumped into like oh, look what they are doing now with this research. Like look how they're just blowing all this money on this stupid research. And I was like, what are you talking about? There's hardly any money spent on this, and it was just little old me like doing it, but it was really saying as if I'm part of like someone who's trying to derogate like conspiracy believers. It didn't help that the headline of this article was something like "Believe in conspiracy theories, blame your parents." That was the title of the headline. So that didn't really help, to be totally honest. It was the Daily Mail Online. They're not really the greatest newspaper, but yeah,
I was wondering
yeah,
whether you were going to say the name or
it
not
did.
there.
Yeah, no, I said it, yeah. But yeah, it's just like, and I guess it, it just didn't help that, yeah, it had that sort of headline as well. Like, it's not really what I was saying in the research, like at all, but that's kind of what they picked out. And then thereafter, the comments is, and I'm just thinking that they're reading this article and they just think it's a load of like, I don't know, load of rubbish. And the scientist who done it is part of the plan to derogate conspiracy believers and things like that. And yeah, as Mikey said, it's a bit sad and disheartening. So yeah, it'd be nice if that could
Yeah,
be
we're not
gone.
grifters.
Yeah, we're not grifters.
Yeah.
We're not conspiracy
Yeah.
entrepreneurs.
I think the point that you're making too, Ricky, is it's an interesting point that kind of goes across to all science too, right? And conspiracy theories, I think that it relates a lot to science and just information in general, what we're consuming. And even though you did this amazing research, science communication is something that's really unique, and you have to have people that understand the science to be able to translate to the greater public. And so when you have like articles that are misrepresenting your work, it just delegitimizes the work that's been done, and went through peer review, went through ethics, went through years of reviews with your supervisor, right? These are things that we have to deal with that people aren't familiar with. And I think that's why it's so important that we have you guys on for things like for podcasts like this and other things that are legitimately empirically informed, and getting people to be more aware of the process. And Mikey, you mentioned open science, which is something that we don't talk too much about on this podcast, but we have mentioned it. It's the idea that science should be accessible to everybody, and there is a bigger push to making articles accessible to people and not having to pay stupid journal fees to access research that should be accessible to everybody, right? And that's my little like my monologue for the day. So I'm done with that. But I think that the work that you guys are doing is truly fascinating, fun to engage with, and I see the implications going forward, especially with this vaccines right now, very common in a lot of countries right now. And that's the most relevant conspiracy theory that I am now seeing a lot more of, that I'm not used to seeing on a daily basis. Actually engaging with people that believe this and are more vocal about it. So I'm curious as to, just before we go, like, do you think that COVID has kind of created this like readiness to just express your belief in these conspiracies? Or like, I feel like people are saying it more out loud these days, especially in Canada.
It's relevant to everyone, and yeah, especially in Canada, but I think especially in the UK, especially in the US, we've seen it a lot. And I think the point is it's relevant to everyone now. It's a global pandemic, right? And well, by definition, a pandemic. Yeah. And what we know is that existential threats, as Ricky's mentioned, lead to conspiracy beliefs, right? If we're all experiencing the same existential threat, we're all going to share this same maybe propensity to believe in these conspiracy theories if we were already going to believe it. So yeah, I think that universal relevance at the moment is the biggest difficulty, I think, to tackle there, because it's just affecting all of us.
Yeah, just on that. So yeah, it's this like a super threat that we're all still going through right now. And even though, it's coming up to 2 years or now or something like that, but there's been points where, it might be different in Canada, but I know that there's been waves, in each country, and when the wave goes down, everyone's like, oh yeah, the pandemic's gone and everything. But no, it's still here. It's still here. UK's we're just about to come out of our lockdown soon, but there's actual real worries right now that there's this new variant, this Indian variant, is starting to spread. So there's even more uncertain, even though we were guaranteed near enough that we're going to be unlocking soon. Now there's uncertainty again. So this uncertainty, this existential dread is just continuing and continuing. So it's not surprising that I think that people are more and more like maybe opening up about these conspiracy theories because this threat is just still there. So, that it's just a way for them to deflect from the threat, deflect from the reality of it. I think that when the COVID-19, I think you're right in that sense. So when COVID-19 subsides, people's well-beings and lives are better, then you will hear less about these conspiracy theories. I mean, just obviously because the COVID will be gone. But yeah, I think the fact that it's these uncertainties that are still there with us, even though we've got vaccines and that, we just don't know when our lives are going to get back together, back to normal. So I think we'll probably still be hearing about these for a long while.
Yeah, and I think like I love the point that you make, that it's like this is a global thing that everybody's experiencing. You guys in the UK are experiencing similar situations that I'm experiencing in Canada, right? With conspiracy theorists. It is an
Mm,
international thing that we have all experienced together. And in a way it brings us together, but it also can, create that synonymous, like there's issues everywhere and they're
Exactly.
the same issues for everybody. And these conspiracy theories are gripping every country in a different way, but
mm,
synonymously you're
Hmm.
kind of experiencing the
Hmm.
same thing where people are kind of revolting towards this
Definitely.
pandemic. So it's really interesting.
No, yeah, no. I was going to say real
So
quick as well. So
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead, Mikey. Go ahead.
while it is global, we do have some evidence that we uncovered last year that it is also linked to cultural orientation, right? So in countries that are more individualistic, our data suggests that they're more likely to believe COVID conspiracies than countries that are more collectivistic, essentially. So while it may be global, it may also be tied
Yeah,
to our cultural orientations as well. Just add that little nugget of info at the end there.
absolutely.
mm,
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point, Mikey. Because the UK and North America are quite similar in their individualistic
Exactly.
culture, right? So
mm,
whenever you have collectivistic cultures, they have very different approaches. Cultures are just different on each culture, but um, it's interesting that at least across the
Mhm.
pond, the UK is experiencing similar things to
Yep.
Canada,
mm,
and you'll see that across a bunch of different countries
Exactly.
too. So,
mm,
very cool. Guys, this was so much fun. I really had a good time talking to you guys
mm,
about conspiracy theories and learning about your work. I'm sure our listeners did too.
mm.
Is there anything that you guys want to add? Anybody you want to shout out, or any way that people can connect with you if they have any inquiries about conspiracy theories? Hopefully, not overloading you with random
Messages, yeah.
requests
Well,
and
we're
messages.
we're I mean, I'd say relatively active on Twitter, right, Ricky? So my Twitter is at Biddlepsych. That's Biddle psych as in psychology. I can't remember yours, Ricky. If
Mhm.
you can plug your Twitter.
I'm just trying to find mine
I
now. I
think
can't
it's
remember off the top of my
psych
head.
underscore green or green underscore psych. Either of those two. Search both.
Something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
we'll add them as well whenever we post the
Yeah.
episode,
Yeah.
so you guys
Thanks.
don't have to stress
Perfect. Yeah,
about it.
something like that. That's how you follow us.
Yeah.
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 I, mm. One thing I was just going to like end on really is like if anyone is interested in researching this stuff, University of Kent is a hub for
Yeah.
conspiracy theory research. It's obviously in the UK, and obviously there's plenty we've noted. This is a growing field, this research field. So it's the last sort of 20 years. So there's lots and lots of scope, and lots more to be found out. Basically, we're only just uncovering I've only just kind of coming up with theories and at the moment. So yeah, if any of your listeners are interested into researching this stuff, then University of Kent is a good place. But there are plenty of others as well. But yeah, I just want to make that aware because I did my undergraduate and I didn't even it was only really late on that I found out after my undergraduate that there was actually research on this area. And as soon as I found that out, that's it. I tried to look for universities that were doing this research, and that's where I found University of Kent. So I'm just saying, yeah, obviously your readers will be aware because we're doing that research anyway. But yeah, there's lots more research to be done on this area. So
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, you're looking for new
Yeah,
colleagues.
recruit.
I love it. This is good.
yeah.
Um, the work that you guys are doing, it's true though. I mean, I looked up the first thing you Google whenever you look up conspiracy theory and like in psychology, University of Kent's quite high up there, right? So you guys are one of the leading schools for conspiracy theories in psychology, which is awesome. It's
That's
nothing
good.
to it's a big accomplishment, and you guys are continuing to add to that research in a meaningful way. So I appreciate you guys coming on. Thanks again, Mikey and Ricky. This is a great time, and yeah, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for
Thank you
joining,
so much
guys.
for having us. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
cheers.
great
Thank you.
chat. I really enjoyed that.